Ever notice just how much power there can be in silence? I mean, we all know that saying silence is golden, but how often do we actually put it into practice?
Yeah, it's funny how that is.
Today, we're going deep into Stoic philosophy to uncover just how valuable silence can be
Oh,
for navigating the ups and downs of life.
the Stoics, yeah.
Exactly.
They're fascinating.
We'll be exploring an article inspired by the Stoic philosophers, especially Marcus Aurelius.
Ah, Marcus Aurelius.
I know.
Yeah, the Roman emperor
Yeah.
with those incredible meditations.
His reflections on living a good and meaningful life.
What strikes me about Stoicism is how relevant it still is. Even today, its emphasis on what we can control,
Right.
our own thoughts and
This
actions.
is so powerful.
It offers such a powerful framework for navigating challenges and cultivating inner peace.
And that's exactly what this article digs into.
Really?
It outlines 9 specific situations
All right.
where silence
Okay.
becomes the secret weapon
I like that. A secret weapon.
for personal growth, handling tough relationships,
Oh, well.
and even dealing with chaos.
It really covers a wide range of human experiences.
Right.
From dealing with unfair criticism to coping with loss. The common thread
Okay.
is that intentional silence empowers us to respond with more wisdom and resilience.
Okay, let's unpack the first situation. Facing unfair criticism.
All right.
You know that feeling when someone throws shade your way
Oh, yeah.
and your immediate reaction is to fire back,
Mm.
defend yourself, maybe even throw some shade right back?
It's a natural human instinct.
Total.
But the Stoics would urge us to pause before reacting.
Interesting.
As Marcus Aurelius wrote, if someone criticizes you unjustly, it's not the thing itself that harms you, but how you react to it.
Wow, that's such a powerful reminder. It's not the criticism itself that stings.
Right.
It's our own reaction that amplifies the hurt. So instead of getting defensive, how can silence help us?
Well, silence creates space for a more measured response. It gives us a chance to step back from that initial surge of emotion and assess the criticism objectively.
Okay.
Is there any truth to it? Could it be an opportunity for growth? If not, we can choose to let it go without giving it power over our emotional state.
That makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
silence isn't about ignoring the criticism or
Right.
pretending it doesn't matter. It's about taking control of our reaction
Exactly.
and choosing how we want to engage, if at all.
It's about choosing a response that aligns with our values and goals, rather than simply reacting on autopilot.
But isn't there a risk that silence could be perceived as weakness or agreement? I mean, if someone criticizes you and you don't say anything, won't they think they've won?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And that's where the Stoic concept of self-mastery comes into play.
Okay.
Silence, when it stems from a place of inner strength and clarity, can actually be more powerful than any heated rebuttal.
Help me understand that a little more. How does silence demonstrate self-mastery in this context?
Think about it this way. When we react defensively, we're essentially letting the other person dictate our emotional state. We're giving them power over our inner peace.
Yeah.
But when we choose to respond with silence,
Okay.
we're demonstrating that we're not controlled by their words or opinions.
So it's about taking back our power, choosing how we want to feel,
Yes.
regardless of what the other person says or does.
Precisely. And that kind of self-control can be incredibly disarming. When someone expects you to get defensive and you meet them with calm silence,
Yeah.
it can completely shift the dynamic.
It's like you're silently saying, I'm not going to let your negativity bring me down.
Right.
I'm in control here.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've tackled unfair criticism. Let's move on to another common social scenario. Dealing with someone who can't start boasting.
Oh, I know the type.
You know the type.
Yeah.
Every story they tell is designed to highlight how amazing they are.
Yeah.
How did the Stoics suggest we handle that kind of situation?
This one can be tricky because it often triggers our own insecurities. We might feel the need to compete to prove that we're just as accomplished,
Yeah.
or even better.
I can definitely relate to that. It's easy to get sucked into that game of one-upmanship,
Totally.
especially if you're feeling a bit insecure yourself.
But the Stoics offer a different approach. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, famously said that actions speak louder than words. Instead of trying to outboast the boaster,
Okay.
what if we simply let our own actions and accomplishments speak for themselves?
I love that. So instead of launching into my own elaborate story to try to top theirs,
Yeah.
maybe I just offer a simple, that's impressive.
Exactly. You're acknowledging their achievement without feeding into the need for constant validation. And you're also subtly conveying a message of self-assurance.
It's like you're saying, I'm confident in my own journey,
Yeah.
and I don't need to prove anything. But isn't there a risk that this could come across as dismissive or arrogant?
It's all about the intention and delivery. If your silence is coming from a place of genuine confidence and a desire to avoid a pointless competition, it will likely be perceived as such.
So it's not about being aloof or superior.
Right.
It's about choosing to engage in a way that feels authentic and aligned with our own values.
Right. And sometimes that means stepping back from the temptation to constantly prove ourselves. Now, this doesn't mean we can never share our own accomplishments or stories, but it's about finding a balance between expressing ourselves and letting our actions speak for themselves.
That's a great point. It's about recognizing when our words are truly adding value to the conversation.
Yeah.
And when they might just be fueling a cycle of ego-driven competition.
Exactly. And sometimes the most powerful way to connect with someone is to simply listen and acknowledge their experiences without feeling the need to constantly insert ourselves into the narrative.
I can see how that could lead to a much more genuine and meaningful interaction.
Right.
Okay, so far we've covered how silence can be a powerful tool for dealing with unfair criticism and navigating conversations with boastful people.
It can.
But what about those situations where we're dealing with strong emotions like anger?
Oh.
We all know how destructive that can be if we let it run wild.
This is where silence becomes a sanctuary. Marcus Aurelius was acutely aware of the destructive power of anger, writing, "How much worse are the consequences of anger than the things that caused it?"
Ooh, that's a chilling thought. It's like we often inflict more damage on ourselves and others through our angry reactions than the initial offense itself.
Exactly. So how do we navigate those moments when we feel that anger rising up within us? The Stoics suggest that silence can be our refuge.
So instead of lashing out or saying something we'll regret, we take a moment to be silent.
Yes, it's about creating that space to cool down before we act.
Okay.
It's about choosing a wise response rather than reacting impulsively.
Okay, so let's say a colleague makes a mistake that really impacts my work. My first instinct might be to let them have it.
Yeah.
But instead I take a moment of silence. I breathe, I reflect. How does that actually help?
Think about what happens when we react in anger. Our heart races. Our thoughts become clouded.
Yeah.
We might say things that damage relationships or even escalate the situation.
It's like we're hijacked by our emotions and lose the ability to think clearly.
Exactly. But when we choose silence, we're interrupting that pattern. We're giving ourselves a chance to calm down, to access that part of our brain that can think rationally and make wise decisions.
It's like hitting the pause button on our emotional autopilot.
Yes.
So we can choose a more skillful response.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that silence doesn't mean we're suppressing our anger or pretending it doesn't exist.
It's more about creating space for those emotions to settle.
Yes.
So we can respond in a way that's aligned with our values and goals.
Precisely. And, you know, the article actually brings up Gandhi as an example of someone who mastered this practice.
That makes sense. Gandhi faced incredible provocation and injustice, yet he was known for his incredible resilience and commitment to nonviolence.
His life really embodies that Stoic ideal of focusing on what we can control, which is our own response, not necessarily the actions of others.
That's a powerful reminder. So when we choose silence in a moment of anger, we're not condoning the offense or letting the other person off the hook.
Right.
We're choosing to take control of our own emotional well-being and respond in a way that aligns with our highest selves.
Exactly. And often that silent pause is all we need to shift from a reactive state to a more empowered and compassionate one. Okay, so we've talked about how silence can help us navigate situations involving criticism, boasting, and even anger. But what about when we're faced with something like rumors?
Rumors, they can spread so quickly.
They do.
And it's easy to feel like we need to defend ourselves.
You're right, it can be a real struggle. But the Stoics remind us that rumors are often beyond our control. Remember that quote from Marcus Aurelius? "You hold power over your mind, not over outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength.
So it's about recognizing that we can't always control what other people say or believe about us, but we can control how we choose to respond internally.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that our energy is better spent focusing on what we can influence, like our own actions and integrity, rather than getting swept up in things we can't.
The article makes a really interesting point about how responding to rumors often just gives them more life, more energy. But silence can actually starve them of that energy.
It's like refusing to play the game. The more you engage, the more power you give to the rumor. But when you choose silence, you're essentially saying, I'm not going to get caught up in this. I trust that the truth will speak for itself.
That takes a lot of trust, especially when it feels like your reputation is on the line.
It does. But the Stoics would argue that true strength lies in focusing on what we can control, which is our own actions and how we choose to show up in the world.
They gave a great example in the article. Imagine a community leader who's been falsely accused of something. Instead of addressing every single accusation and getting caught in a defensive spiral, they stay focused on their work and let their actions speak for themselves.
That's such a powerful image. And it highlights how silence can actually be a demonstration of integrity. It's like they're saying, I'm not going to waste my time and energy on this. I'm going to let my actions speak louder than these unfounded claims.
And over time, if the accusations are baseless, the truth has a way of emerging. Their silence becomes a testament to their character and resilience.
Exactly. It's about choosing to operate from a place of inner strength rather than getting pulled into the drama and negativity.
So we've covered criticism, boastfulness, anger, and now rumors.
We have.
All these situations where silence can be surprisingly effective.
It can be.
But now we're going to get into some even heavier territory, dealing with loss.
Loss.
Whether it's the loss of a loved one, a job, or a relationship, it can be incredibly painful.
This is where silence can be incredibly healing. Loss can leave us feeling raw and vulnerable. And it's natural to want to fill that void with noise distractions, anything to avoid the pain.
It's like we're afraid to be alone with those difficult emotions.
That's very true. But the Stoics believe that silence is essential for processing grief. It's about creating space to honor our pain, to reflect, and to ultimately find meaning in the loss. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, beautifully articulated this when he wrote, "The day which we fear as our last is but the beginning of eternity." He was emphasizing that there's a larger perspective beyond our immediate suffering.
That's a beautiful quote. It reminds me that even in the midst of profound loss, there's a continuity, a sense that life goes on.
Exactly. And silence allows us to tap into that larger perspective. It's about creating a space where we can feel the full weight of our emotions without judgment or the need to fix them.
The article mentions C.S. Lewis, who found solace in silence after the death of his wife.
Right.
He wrote about how that silence helped him navigate his grief and ultimately discover deeper truths about life and love.
It's a powerful reminder that silence isn't about suppressing our emotions.
Right.
It's about creating a container for them to flow naturally without resistance.
So it's not about trying to be strong or stoic in the sense of being unemotional. It's about allowing ourselves to grieve fully, to honor those feelings, and to find our own unique path through the darkness.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And often silence is the most compassionate and supportive presence we can offer ourselves in those difficult moments.
You know, it's interesting to think about how silence can be so versatile. We've seen how it can be a shield against criticism,
Right.
a tool for navigating tricky social situations, a sanctuary from anger, a way to starve rumors of their power, and now a balm for grief. It seems like it can take on so many different forms depending on the situation.
That's what I find so fascinating about this concept. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about recognizing the power of silence and learning how to wield it skillfully in different areas of our lives.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But we still have a few more situations to explore. Up next, we're going to delve into the tricky territory of dealing with ignorance.
Oh, dealing with ignorance. This is one that can be incredibly frustrating, especially when it's mixed with arrogance. It's so tempting to try to set the record straight, to argue, to prove our point.
I can definitely relate to that. It can be hard to let go of the need to be right, especially when we feel like someone is being willfully ignorant. But how do the Stoics suggest we approach this?
Well, they remind us that we can only control our own actions and thoughts, not the beliefs of others. Engaging with someone who's deeply entrenched in their ignorance, especially if they're unwilling to listen, can drain our energy and lead to unnecessary frustration.
I've definitely been there. Sometimes it feels like the more you try to reason with someone, the more entrenched they become in their position.
Exactly. It's like trying to push a boulder uphill. So what's the alternative? The Stoics would suggest that sometimes the most powerful response is to simply disengage.
Okay.
To choose silence over a futile argument.
That can be so hard, though.
It can.
Especially when we feel like we're right.
It does take a lot of self-control. But remember what we talked about earlier. Silence can be a form of self-mastery.
Help me connect the dots here. How does silence demonstrate self-mastery in this context?
When we choose silence over engaging with someone who's closed off to our perspective, we're essentially saying, I'm not going to let your ignorance dictate my emotional state. I'm choosing to conserve my energy and focus on what I can control, which is my own thoughts and actions.
So it's about recognizing that we can't change other people's minds, but we can choose how we want to react to their beliefs.
Precisely. And sometimes the wisest course of action is to simply step back and let those beliefs play out on their own. The article uses Galileo as a great example of this. He was a champion of the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Ah, Galileo.
But he faced intense opposition from those who were absolutely convinced that the Earth was the center of everything.
It must have been incredibly frustrating to deal with that level of resistance, especially when he knew he was right.
Absolutely. But instead of engaging in endless debates, he chose to let his findings in time speak for themselves.
Interesting.
He focused on what he could control.
Yeah.
His research, his work, his own understanding of the universe.
And ultimately, history proved him right.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective way to combat ignorance is not through argument or persuasion, but through living by our own principles and letting the truth reveal itself in its own time.
So it's not about being passive or giving up. It's about choosing our battles wisely and recognizing that sometimes silence is the most powerful statement we can make.
That's a great way to put it. It's about choosing to invest our energy in what truly matters and letting go of the need to convince everyone of our perspective. Okay, we've explored how silence can be a valuable tool for dealing with criticism, boastfulness, anger, rumors, loss, and even ignorance.
Right.
But there's still more to uncover. Up next, we're going to dive into how the Stoics suggest we handle insults.
Ooh, this one feels particularly challenging as insults often trigger that fight or flight response. We feel attacked.
Yeah.
And our instinct is to defend ourselves, to strike back.
You're absolutely right. It's a natural human reaction to want to protect ourselves when we feel attacked. But the Stoics, once again, offer a different perspective.
I'm intrigued. How do they suggest we handle those moments when someone tries to bring us down with their words?
Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, offers this incredibly insightful observation. If someone succeeds in provoking Eber, you realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. So he's saying that we have a choice in how we respond. We can either let someone else's words control our emotions, or we can choose a different path.
Exactly. We have the power to decide whether we're going to let someone else's negativity dictate our inner state.
And that path in this case might be silence.
Precisely. Silence in the face of an insult can be a powerful act of strength. It demonstrates that you're not going to let someone else's negativity dictate your state of mind.
Okay.
You're choosing to rise above the insult rather than getting pulled into a cycle of retaliation.
It's like you're silently saying, your words don't have power over me. I'm not going to let you define who I am. But isn't there a risk that silence could be misinterpreted as weakness or agreement?
There's always that possibility. But again, it comes back to the intention behind our silence. If it's coming from a place of genuine self-control and a refusal to engage in a pointless battle, it will likely be perceived differently than if it's coming from a place of fear or insecurity.
So it's about being mindful of our own internal state.
Yes.
And ensuring that our silence is aligned with our values and goals. It's not about being a doormat.
Right.
It's about choosing a response that empowers us rather than diminishes us.
Exactly. The article brings up Gandhi again as an example. During his movement for Indian independence, he faced countless insults and personal attacks.
Oh, wow.
But he often chose to respond with silence and purposeful action.
His life is such a testament to the power of choosing peace over conflict,
Right.
even in the face of incredible provocation.
And it highlights how silence doesn't mean condoning the insult or agreeing with it. It's a deliberate choice to not let those attacks derail us from our mission.
It takes incredible discipline to do that, especially when emotions are running high.
It does. But it's a powerful reminder that we don't have to engage in every battle. Sometimes the wisest course of action is to simply disengage and choose peace over conflict.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how silence can be a powerful tool for dealing with criticism, boastfulness, anger rumors, loss, ignorance, and even insults.
Well, we have...
But we're not done yet.
Oh, there's more.
We still have 2 more situations to explore,
Okay.
and they're particularly relevant to the world we live in today.
These last 2 are going to delve into the power of silence when facing injustice and chaos. 2 things that can feel incredibly overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We will.
Welcome back. We've been exploring how silence, as the Stoics teach us, can be a source of incredible strength and wisdom.
We've already seen how it can help us navigate those challenging interpersonal situations, like dealing with criticism or boastfulness. But now I'm really curious
Okay.
to hear how silence can help us tackle even bigger issues. Injustice
Oh, yeah.
and chaos,
Those
the
are-
things that can feel
Oh.
so overwhelming, even hopeless sometimes.
You're right. Those are heavy topics. And it's important to acknowledge that silence in this context isn't about ignoring these problems or pretending they don't exist.
So we aren't talking about burying our heads in the sand.
Not at all. It's about finding a way to respond effectively,
Okay.
even when we feel powerless, to change the situation itself.
Okay, I'm starting to see the nuance here.
Okay.
So let's start with injustice.
Right.
We see it all around us, both on a personal level and on a global scale. How do the Stoics suggest we approach this?
They remind us that we can't always control the events themselves, but we can control our reactions to them. Marcus Aurelius put it brilliantly: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice.
It's like rising above that urge for retaliation,
Yeah.
or getting caught up in a cycle of anger and resentment. I can see how that would take a lot of inner strength.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And this is where silence can be so powerful. It allows us to step back from the immediacy of the situation,
Okay.
to calm those reactive emotions and choose a more thoughtful, strategic response.
So instead of just reacting,
Yeah.
we're creating a space for something more constructive to emerge. Can you give me an example of what that might look like in real life?
Absolutely. The article gives the example of Nelson Mandela.
Oh, man, Dad.
After being imprisoned for decades, he could have easily emerged filled with bitterness and a thirst for revenge.
I can't even imagine the strength it must have taken to overcome that level of injustice.
It's truly remarkable. But instead of choosing the path of anger and retribution,
Right.
he chose peace and reconciliation. He chose to focus on healing a divided nation rather than perpetuating the cycle of violence and injustice.
His story is such a powerful example of turning suffering into positive action.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his example shows how silence in the face of injustice can be about creating space for something much bigger and more powerful to emerge.
It's about channeling those difficult emotions into something constructive, something that actually moves us closer to a more just and equitable world.
Exactly. It's not about being passive or simply accepting injustice.
Yeah, right.
It's about choosing a response that's truly effective.
It's about responding from a place of wisdom and strength rather than reacting from a place of hurt and anger.
That's a great way to put it. And it brings us to our final situation: chaos. We live in a world that's constantly bombarding us with information demands and distractions.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel overwhelmed and lost in all the noise.
It really does feel like the world is getting louder and more chaotic. Social media, the 24/7 news cycle, the pressure to be constantly on.
Oh, yeah.
It can be exhausting.
It can be incredibly draining.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where that Stoic emphasis on finding inner peace becomes so crucial.
I agree.
Remember that quote from Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah.
You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength.
I love that quote. It's such a powerful reminder that we have the ability to choose
Right.
how we respond to the chaos swirling around us.
Exactly. And silence is a key tool for cultivating that inner strength.
Oh, okay.
It's about creating space to disconnect from the external noise and reconnect with ourselves.
So it's not about escaping reality or
Right.
pretending the chaos doesn't exist.
Not at all. It's about finding those moments of stillness amidst the storm so we can come back to ourselves,
Okay.
to our values, to what truly matters.
It's like hitting the pause button on all the external demands so we can hear our own inner voice of wisdom and clarity.
Yes. And in those moments of silence, we can find the strength and resilience to navigate the chaos, to make choices that are aligned with our values, and to ultimately live more fulfilling lives.
So we've explored these 9 situations where silence can be such a powerful force. Facing criticism, boastfulness, anger, rumors, loss, ignorance, insults, injustice, and chaos. It seems like the ancient philosophy of Stoicism offers some remarkably relevant guidance for the challenges we face in our modern world.
It's really striking how these ideas from centuries ago can still be so insightful and helpful today.
I agree.
And what I appreciate about this Stoic approach is that it doesn't require grand gestures or huge life changes. It's about those small intentional choices we make in our daily lives.
Exactly. It's about those moments when we choose to pause, to breathe, to respond rather than react.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all do no matter what our circumstances were. Well, this has been such an insightful deep dive into the power of silence.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I have one more thought I'd like to explore with you. You know, it's fascinating to think about how in all these situations, silence can be so powerful. We've covered criticism, boastfulness, anger, rumors, loss, even injustice and chaos.
It really seems like this ancient philosophy of Stoicism has something to offer us even today.
What strikes me is how the Stoics saw silence not just as a tactic, for handling certain situations, but more like a way of being in the world.
Oh, that's interesting. I think you're right. It's not just about how we react in certain moments, but about cultivating that sense of inner stillness, one we can carry with us all the time.
So it's like an ongoing practice, not just something we switch on and off when we need it.
Exactly. It's about integrating these moments of silence into our daily lives. I mean, it could be through meditation, spending time in nature, or even just taking a few minutes to disconnect from all the noise.
Right, to just be.
Yeah, to just be.
That makes so much sense. I mean, when we have that inner stillness, we're less likely to get swept up in all the chaos, right? We can be more grounded, more centered.
Exactly. And from that place of centeredness, we can respond to the world differently, with more wisdom, more compassion, even resilience.
It's like we're building up this, inner reservoir of strength that we can draw on when things get tough.
That's a great way to put it. It's about creating that internal space where we can connect with our values, our intuition, our own inner wisdom.
So as we all head back into our busy lives, maybe the challenge is to find those moments of silence, to cultivate that inner stillness, and see how it transforms not just how we react to things, but how we experience life itself.
It's a beautiful thought. And I think that's really the heart of what the Stoics were trying to teach us.
This deep dive into the power of silence has been, I think it's been truly eye-opening for me. I know I'm going to be approaching things a little differently from now on.
I encourage you to. Experiment with it. See how bringing more silence into your life, even in small ways, can change things.
I think I will.
Maybe it'll shift your perspective, even enhance your well-being.
And for our listeners, if you're intrigued by these ideas by Stoicism, I highly recommend checking out their writings. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they all had so much to say.
Timeless wisdom.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations into fascinating topics and thought-provoking ideas.
We'll be back with more soon.
Until next time, may you find peace, strength, and clarity in the silence.